Okay, so Robert McFerran,
That's me.
when were you born?
Nitty gritty right away.
Oh,
Yeah. I was born the 3rd of the 10th, 1959.
1959, you're considerably older than me. I wasn't. I was born in the 60s.
Well, I was just in the 50s.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was looking up to say, I don't know if you know what happened on your day, the day you were born, apart from the fact that you were
I was
born.
born. My mum went to hospital, I know that.
That was handy.
Yep.
And also, for those of you who maybe can remember 1959, the song that was top of the pops then was called Mac the Knife by Bobby Darin. Yeah, there's some notes, not most of us haven't heard. And also on the 3rd of October in a different year was the day that the east and west of Germany were reunited at the Brandenburg Gate. So I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
No, there you are.
There you go. But you were born then into a family, and you were, well, how many children were there altogether?
There was 4 children in our family. I was the second of the 4. I was telling Ivan the first 3 were born in 25 months. I'm actually 11 months younger than my elder brother.
Yes.
So, yeah. So
your mother was busy?
My mother was busy, but luckily, as we go on the night, you'll find Aunt Sadie lived with us at that stage, and she played a very big part in my Christian life. And we'll come around to that, yeah.
I think what we'll do, we'll sort of 3 sets of photographs we're going to look at.
Right.
But so we're going to start off just with you as a young child, very young child, an infant, really.
Yeah.
So where were you born? And well, obviously in hospital, you're telling me.
Yes.
But then, so where were you brought up then as a young boy?
I was born in Newtonards, and I was brought up just out from Billigan, called Ballyobegan House, a big farmhouse.
Well, let's have a look at that. Well, wait, I think our presentation's ready to go. So we'll take a look at that, and we'll talk about a wee bit about your history. So this is the house. Robert gave me a photograph of the house, and if you drive up in the Shardy Road, it's on the left-hand side there. First house, in fact, on the left-hand side. There's a photograph of it. There's a red Fiesta.
Yes.
Whose is that?
That would be mine. That would be my first car.
We'll talk about that later. Maybe.
Well, yes, yes. Yes.
Some of us are in the know about that red
Yes.
Fiesta. And I think it's one of your uncles you were telling me.
Oh no, it's my cousin. David and Priscilla would look across at him a fair bit. Marshall.
So that's a bit.
Yes.
It's an old manor house now. I'm going to look at some pictures then of yourself, and well, this isn't yourself.
This is
But actually, why Robert gave me this was to show me
the inside of the house. This is the staircase. This was my youngest sister Muriel, on her wedding day.
Sadly, the house is a bit more run down.
It is, yeah.
But inside it would have been a gentleman's residence.
It was, yeah. There was servants and all on my grandfather's day.
Yeah.
Lots of servants.
So some pictures then. Would that be your grandparents?
That would be my grandparents, Agnes and John. We were all related to the Anguses. My grandmother was Agnes Angus.
Right.
And my father John Trimble, and they were originally from Chesney's farm, if you know it, up just at Billigan.
Yeah.
And they moved down to Ballyobegan in 1906 or 1907, and that has been the family residence since.
Right, it's been in the family ever since. And there's some pictures here I'm just showing off. Would your parents be in that?
My father's the one on the left. That is probably, at that time, that was probably most of Kirkcudbright Presbyterian male choir.
Right.
Yes. They were all in the choir at Kirkcudbright Presbyterian, which is where I was brought up. Yeah.
So there's some more.
My Aunt Sadie was in there.
Of course, who's that then?
That's my mother and father.
That's your mum and dad.
That was.
They're both passed.
Yeah, that was my father. My father didn't live an awful lot, a lot longer after that. He had cancer, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your mother,
My mother, she died about 11 years ago.
Yeah, and we'll come to your back to your mum and dad later on.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that. That's some of your wee bit of your background, history background. Ballyobegan House, big old manor house, and I mean you'd mentioned, of course, that you had an aunt who stayed with you as well.
Yes.
And you were saying she took quite an impact in your life.
Yes, well, like I was saying, it was my father. My father wanted a boy, which he got in my brother, and then he wanted a girl. And I came along. And it wasn't really hidden that he was disappointed. well, you can understand looking at me, yeah. But, yes, so whenever my sister came along, my mum, she took to do with my brother, and my sister and my Aunt Sadie more or less took me. And it was very fortunate for, she was going to the Bethel Hall in Ballywalter, and she was very much for the gospel, and I would have got Bible stories read from me from ever I can remember.
Yes.
A lot of lines were repeated, but yes, she was very good, and she would have taken me to the gospel hall. She actually brought my brother and I along here. I think, well, she left when we were 7, so we were less than 7, so it was for 2 weeks before the summer. So then she got married, so we didn't come back here, but I got back here eventually. Yes.
Yeah. So you're saying that your aunt, who really had a big part of your rearing until you were 7,
yes,
because she was brought into the family home.
Yes.
Then she married, Nelson Trimble's uncle.
Uncle, yes.
And sadly he died.
Robert Trimble. Now they were married when I was 7, and he died when I was 20. So
yes,
they were married for 13 years.
And then she married again.
Then she married his brother.
Yes,
Nelson Trimble's father. Yes.
So you're keeping track now, folks.
Yes, she seemed to keep it in the family. She didn't travel very far, you know. Yes, but both marriages were happy, and
yes.
I suppose when you're getting up in years, companies is big a thing, and they both went to the gospel hall, so they were on a level field. They were pulling together.
And so you always had that influence, especially through your Aunt Sarah.
Yes.
Of the
gospel.
know the gospel.
Of the gospel, yes.
Christ.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we could just talk briefly. What was your relationship like then with your mum and dad?
Well, I was probably counted my mum's. I got on well with my mum.
Yeah.
My mum was easy to talk to. Affairs of the heart, let's put it like that. My mum was the one you'd go to.
Yeah.
My father was difficult. My father, if he wanted to talk football, or he loved Suffolk sheep, or talk sheep, or things like that, it was easy enough. When it came to the things of the heart, extremely difficult. He would have talked about maybe animals rather than talk about that. But my father was more giving orders. You did it. He said, he would have sent you out, and if you didn't do it right, when you came back in, he would have the stick and he'd say, well, you can go out and do that right, and if it's not right when you come back in, this is waiting for you. So I think I'm hard to work with now, because I've met people who said it'll do rightly, and other people I've worked with have said, well, if it looks right, it is right. But I was brought up, it's only right if it is right, and the same is for your salvation. Yeah. It's only right if it is right, and if it's from the Bible.
That's right.
Yeah.
And again, we'll come round to that as well. So of course, it wouldn't be an uncommon experience for folks in those days to have a difficult relationship, maybe sometimes, but particularly with the fathers, there was some stricter, maybe they had it more difficult, and they maybe had it difficult themselves.
Yes, well, I think that's probably the way he was brought up.
Yes,
I think he was the youngest of the family, and I think there was the eldest brother picked on him quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I think that didn't help. But no, I respected my father. He was always straight. He always said, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. And he stood by that.
Let's look at a couple more pictures, because the folks here in the hall can see there's a slide saying early years. So we'll look at some early years. This is one of your first modes of transport.
Yep.
That would be you, wouldn't it?
That would be me.
That's Robert and his pram.
Well, it was all our pram. I was actually looking at it the other day when I was looking for the photographs. It's still there.
Is it?
Yes, it's still there.
So anybody needs to borrow a pram. And that's at Ballyobigan.
That's at Ballyobigan, yeah. That's out the back.
And some more pictures here. Is this you and John?
This is John and I. And that's
and who's the lady?
That's
there?
my Aunt Sadie.
That is your Aunt Sadie.
That is my Aunt Sadie.
Because she seems to feature in quite a few photographs.
She does, yeah.
Whenever you're very young.
Yes.
Some more pictures, maybe. Let's have a look. And here's the four children.
Yes.
The run is just from left to right.
From left to right, my brother John, then my sister Agnes, and my sister Muriel, and then there's me in the end with the head sort of. There must have been a wind blowing or something.
I noticed this when I was looking at your picture. I commented on it to you that you seem to be wearing a pair of glasses.
I'm wearing a pair of glasses now, Ivan, only I haven't them on at the minute. Yes.
But we're not used to wearing glasses until you became an
No.
old man.
Yes.
So,
yes.
so, but there's is that part of the story about the bat?
That's about the story about the bat.
But you were a wee boy, and tell us a wee bit about the bat.
With the bat, well, I was between 1 and 2. Like I say, my father's favourites was my sister Agnes there, the two taller ones other than me, and they stayed with my mum and dad in their bedroom, but I was put into a bedroom with my grandmother. And I was in the cot, and obviously I'd seen this thing behind the head of the cot, and I was doing a bit of, I was trying to climb out of the cot, I remember that. And then the second time my mum came in, she told me, "You're going to get smacked if you try that again. Go to sleep." So fear got me to lie down, I think. And as I lay down and looked up, this thing dropped off the top of the bed onto my head. So that scared the life out of me, and I had a squint. My grandmother had to cut the bat out of my hair. So the glasses comes from the fact that I had to have 2 operations in my eye to straighten my eye. They were both pre-7. Yes, it was a frightening thing for me at the time.
How are you with bats now?
I'm actually all right. I was telling you also that whenever we ordered a buggy pram for Jonah, when we opened the box, what was in the box? It came from England. There was a bat in the box. So lucky enough, Amy worked with a lady called Carrie, and what is she, Amy? She's a vat nurse. A bat nurse. Yes, and Amy had helped her, so we got her out and they got the wee bat.
Oh, it was still alive?
Well, it was still alive. And she took it away and she knew what to do with it.
So, and let me say, I have a couple more pictures, I think, while you're young here. No, we don't. We'll just leave it there. We'll come to the school education and we know it. So you went to church.
Yes.
Apart from your Aunt Sadie taking you to Bethel Hall and Ballywalter to hear the gospel, you also were family members of...
We were in Kirkcudbright Presbyterian Church. My father later on, he became an elder. At the start he refused he didn't think he was good enough, but then he came to the realisation that there's none of us that are good enough. But we have to answer if the Lord calls us. But anyway, we started Sunday school between 4 and 5, and we went right through to 16. We went to Sunday school in the morning. We went to then the church, and then went out to children's Sunday school until we were probably about 10. And then we stayed in church, and then we would have went to the gospel hall in the afternoon. Yes. And
you were telling me you have a similarity with me, and your mother also played the organ?
My mother, no, it wasn't Kirkcudbright. My mother was reared at Glastonbury Corner. She was Methodist, but she played the organ in the Presbyterian church, and she would have taught in the Sunday school in the Presbyterian church. And like my grandfather, he was the sexton of the Methodist church up at the corner. Yes.
And let's move on to school and education a wee bit here and come back again. Here's some of your education
Yes.
riding a horse.
Note the extravagant bridle and saddle, and
Yes.
there's no expense spared.
Have you an incident with this horse?
Oh yes, I fell off the horse.
You
Well,
don't want to be on a horse.
once I fell off, and down at the banks at the shore, and she rolled over me, but that was all right. Another incident. Well, notice we had the headgear and all on as well. So my horse wasn't a jumper, but she was a speedster. And one time going around a field flat out, of course, the feet went below her, and it's never a good thing whenever your legs are up and your head's heading for the ground. But the next thing I remember was coming up and looking, and the horse was quite happily grazing at the top of the field. I had obviously had a little sleep or what like. But, yes, but no, I didn't tell anybody, because I was telling Ivan I had knocked myself out before while climbing in the barn, and it meant I missed PE at school the next day, which was the one subject that I really liked. So I wasn't going to let that happen again. So, but yes.
And at school then, I wonder, do I have a couple of pictures? Yeah, well, this is a Glasgow, but just before Glasgow, you went to Ballywalter
Primary School, yes.
But before you went to school in the mornings?
But at the age of 7, we started milking cows. There was one in particular. It was my mother and my aunt Sadie did the milking, and my father came in if there was a problem. But there was an accident, and one was hit with a car, and she was very nervous. She was even more nervous when my father went near her.
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt and my mother were scared of her. So what I told them, probably back up son, was put in to milk the cow. And I sort of, from ever I can remember, I've loved animals and I've got on well with animals, and it worked all right. And when it was seen I could do that, then we got that job morning before school, and well, as far as we got before school, and then when we come home from school in the afternoon, and I was telling Ivan, I pitied my classmates for it was generally only a lick and a promise before you went to school, and I'm sure the smell wasn't good in the summer, but that's as it was. That's how life was in those days.
Yeah. So you went to school, and I think you did well enough at school, didn't you? You enjoyed school, okay?
Well, I was disappointed at the primary school, but I was telling Ivan, our headmaster Stephen, remember him, he didn't get anybody through the 11 plus in 7 years or something, so there wasn't much hope for us. He actually told us when we went into P7 that we were all going to Glasgow, so he wasn't going to bother practicing papers for the 11 plus. We were just going to learn algebra instead. So, and he turned out to be right.
Partly right, partly.
Yes.
You did. Having said that, you enjoyed Glasgow, and coming back to your sport again. I mean, anybody who knew Robert, like I did, and others knew that Robert was always very, very fast. And at school, you did well in sport.
I did, yeah. I was sort of an all-rounder, but it came from work at home.
Yeah.
You're always on the go. I had a sort of a high natural fitness level.
Yeah.
There's another thing I was saying, my father and I didn't get on because he liked football, which I was quite good at. He was fast when he was young, which I was quite good at. He liked animals, which I was quite good at. And my brother, whom was his son in there, was not good at any of the three. And I actually think it worked the other way. Rather than him thinking more of me, he was more disappointed that my brother wasn't better. But who knows? It's what the Lord does. What the Lord gives you. It's the talents He gives you. Yeah, and you make the best of them.
And I know by fourth form you had won every race.
And fourth form,
you'd never been beaten in triple jump, except for that story we talked about. But so I mean, and I know whenever you did well, one of these we're looking at some awards that you have here.
Those would be Sportsman of the Year for probably fourth form. Like I got Sportsman of the Year every year at Glasgow.
Yeah.
So.
And I know whenever you come on then to Regent House, which is where I met you then at sixth form. Well, I've known you a bit before that, but I know we had a cross country team, and there was some people took it very, very seriously, running up in the Craig Ampit and around different places. And I'll put it like this: Robert was the first fella I ever knew who got an honours time Regent for running, and he was running circles around people who had been practicing running every day, and this fella came from the mid-arts and was running circles around them. And so yes, I remember that very well. And you're always very competitive anyway.
Well, that's one of my faults. Yes, it's one of my faults. Yeah.
I remember whenever at parents, you know the parents' races you have at the schools when the kids are there, I would generally do quite a lot of those, even win them, unless Robert was there. There was no point trying. That sort of way.
So he's saying you didn't try, you just let me win, is that it? Yes.
So here you went on to Greenmount then?
Yes. My sister said, give you that one and let the people see what it looked like with hair.
Oh, yes. And again, you've won Sportsman of the Year there at Greenmount.
Yes.
And,
yes, it was.
So,
yeah.
I'll actually mention a wee story about Greenmount. There you are.
Yes.
Again, around that era.
That was just before. That was probably
before that.
Just the last Regent whenever I went out for the formal.
Oh, right.
Probably.
Is that what that was?
I think so.
Right. Very good. Yeah. I like the tie, lovely.
That's what they call a bull knot.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's just come back a wee bit because, of course, back in something happened very particular in 1972.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was when I got saved in the 13th of September. I had been, the Spirit had been speaking with me for a long time. You would know that well. You would understand that, for I've been going to Bethel Hall. But the Lord also, He uses your situation. And if you read Matthew 24 and 40, it would tell you about two working in the field. One would be taken and one would be left. Or two women at the mill grinding, one would be taken and one would be left. And I knew it wasn't literal, but at the same time I knew if the Lord came, I was going to be left. And yes, I struggled with it. I wouldn't say that I purposely put it off, but I have a short attention span, and being out living where I did, it wasn't very long till something would come along and distract me. So it got put off and off till one evening, I think it was the week after, there was a gospel mission in the Bethel Hall in Ballywalter. And one of the songs we were singing there that Curtis spoke about, put the fear into him, it did the same for me. So I was in bed, big old house, beside the window, a yew tree outside it. But the moon was shining, a full moon, I remember it as clear. And it was as if there was no tree there. And I couldn't get away from the light of the moon. And I got below the sheets, and the Spirit of the Lord obviously was striving with me. And eventually got up and went for my mum. For my mum was the one I could speak to. And I come down into the kitchen, and there she was, sitting in the chair with her feet in the oven, keeping warm. So that was what she would have done regularly. And I went and I told her that I needed to get saved. And she took me just by the hand and went up, and I got down and knelt beside my bed. And I told the Lord I was sorry for my sins. I was sorry for getting saved off. And I asked Him to save me and take me to heaven with Him when He returned. And then I got into bed, and I think my mother kissed me in the head. I'm not 100% sure, but it was just as if there was a great weight lifted off me. Just peace came over me. And nothing else seemed to matter. I got to sleep, no problem. But now I would say people expect, there's no fireworks or anything, But what I would say is, when I was going to gospel meetings after that, I actually enjoyed going to them. Previous to this, I would have been sitting, probably we would have been late and sitting nicely up at the front, and I always got the impression that the speaker was looking at me and preaching at me, which he may or may not have been. It may just have been the Spirit working on me. But I had no longer any apprehension about going to the meeting, because I knew I had been saved. The Lord had come and I had accepted him, and I was heading for the glory.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. God bless.
Yeah.
You gave your heart to the Lord then, and then you went on through school, did your A-level.
Yes.
We get on very well in school, and although we did completely different subjects.
Yes. Yep.
You did sort of academic ones, I just faffed about, but anyway.
Well, I did the same with academic ones. Yes.
Yeah, we went through school, and then you went on to Greenmount, and after that you went to work for a little while in England, because you're a young Christian out in the world now, and your boss was actually an atheist.
He was, yes.
And he gave you a bit of a hard time.
He would always question me. He was an atheist. He was a doctor of philosophy. He was well learned, and probably once I was saved, I probably didn't move on as I should. I said to you, or told Ivan, like, it was my Aunt Sadie was the first one that I told I'd got saved to, and that was, you always went into her house, and the first thing is, are you thinking of getting saved? So I went up this day and I was ready for her, and yes, I'm saved, and she said it was great. But it didn't really. 2 weeks later I went back and she asked me, was I thinking about getting saved? And that sort of knocked me back a bit, because I was maybe a wee bit cheeky. I said, sure, I told you I got saved. But it made me think, and yeah, I kept going to Romans 10 and 9, and that was what I believed. Jesus Christ was Lord, and God had raised him from the dead, and if you believe that, you're saved. Also, maybe we had one of these with Tom, and I resonate with Tom. He said, when he told at school, well, we always knew you were good living. And if you tell someone who's off that sway, trying to tell them that good living will do nothing for you in eternity, they don't want to know, basically. But then my friends at school, most of my friends at school, already thought I was a Christian, already thought I was saved. So telling them was easy. Yes. You know, but
of course you went to Greenmount, and that's different.
Yes.
And at Greenmount, I mean, if you knew Robert, I wonder if I got a picture here. I wonder if I got a picture. This is you and your mum.
That's me and my mother, yes.
Yeah. I wonder if I've got. There's a picture of, I don't know what height you think Donard is, but Robert made it about a foot higher, and we put another stone on top. We were away with the youth fellowship. I think it's the next picture. No, there you are. Robert's playing a bit of a. There you are. Robert's playing a bit of a prank there. He's the guy in the white. That was taken away back in 79 or 80, something like that. And the next picture, I don't know if you. Well, I almost wondered. This is taken the same night, and I almost wondered who it was hanging on the left-hand side of the picture. No?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't remember if it was.
Well, it's just that you're not anywhere else in the picture. Just one. But anyway, coming back to Greenmount.
Yes.
Something gave you a bit of a jar. Somebody said to you.
Yes. There was one night in particular. Now, I wasn't attending the CE and Greenmount regularly as I should, but there was one evening. Kenneth Hughes was coming from up here from down here with people I knew. So I had 3 friends, 2 Roman Catholics and a Protestant. None were saved. And I talked them into coming and seeing these people I knew. So we went along to the room, and I thought, strange, there was nobody there. So we'll wait a while and see what happens. But also there was space invaders in this room. So then it must be cancelled, and I haven't heard. So we played Space Invaders. And so it was the best I ever did in the Space Invaders. But I think it was actually the devil that was keeping me there. But when it was over, we all decided, well, it's time to go out, because if we don't get out now, the gates will be shut. We'll have to stay in. So we were going out for chips. And the meeting had been moved to a conference room. And it was a conference room, you couldn't hear anything. There was no windows in it unless you went and looked in the door. There was only a small window in it, so by so. But everyone was gone apart from two brothers, David Kelso and Brian Young. And they were speaking to this guy. If you had to pick who was probably the worst in the college, this was him. So we were coming marching to the door, and he just turned to me and he said, "Hey Bert," people would call me Bert. My wife doesn't like it, but people would call me Bert. He says to me, "Would you tell these two guys to wise up?" And I turned to him and I said to him, "I think you would do well to pay heed to what they're telling you."
Because they were explaining the gospel.
Because they were explaining the gospel to him. And the look of shock on his face shocked me, because it told me he picked me out of the four, that I wasn't living the way I should be. I should have said, I even was leading on to there, if there was pranks going on at Greenmount, I liked to be there. And obviously I had been seen. Now, I wouldn't have done anything that would have caused anybody any harm, any real harm. But you did things. You took people's bed and set them up in the middle of a cornfield or something. You know, things like that. Nothing, there's no real harm in it. But obviously, this fella didn't see me as a Christian. So that sort of started me. I thought, now, I haven't read the Bible from start to finish. I had tried, but when I get to the genealogies and all that, and the likes of Ezekiel, I'd sort of skipped over that. So that was the first time I started to read my Bible cover to cover. And it was all because of that incident with that fella. But it let me know I had to change my ways.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on a wee bit more. Look at some of those pictures. I'm going to come now to love and marriage.
Mm.
And of course, you met a very nice young lady, and now your sister worked in Stuart's shoe shop in Yards.
Yes.
And there was a very attractive young lady who was working there.
Well, there might well have been more than one, but there was one in particular.
Very diplomatic. And of course, here we are, and it led to marriage.
Yes.
So you met Sharon.
I did.
Where did you meet her?
I met her at my sister's wedding.
There you go.
I didn't notice her in the shop, but she said she noticed me.
Well, that was good.
You know, like, you know, this great Hulk and that, you know, it's up into the shop, yeah. Yes, I noticed her at the wedding, yes.
So how did you introduce yourself there then?
I asked her to dance with me, that was...
And she said yes?
Well, surprisingly she did. And you'd be surprised if you seen my dancing. You'd be very surprised.
Well, you must have made a big impression.
Yes.
Because when was it you asked her to marry her?
It would have been 6 weeks afterwards.
6 weeks after that.
It was one of those things, Ivan, I told you.
That's right.
You have to keep buying roses or chocolates or you get married.
And Sharon said yes.
And she said yes, surprisingly the first time. Yeah.
And those are lovely photographs of her.
Taken by a great photographer.
Oh, yes. So we got married, or well, you and Sharon got married.
Yes.
And there's some of the family at the Briansburn.
The Briansburn, yes.
You had your reception.
Yes.
Mine in Coven.
Yes.
And of course we're moving on with time, but A few years later, we have some family comes along.
Yes, we were blessed with 2 good children.
2 lovely children.
2 lovely children.
There's when they were young. And
that was us in Spain.
So you have
Matthew and Amy.
Matthew and Amy, and of course they've grown up, and you've expanded.
We have indeed, yes. We have 2 grandsons and another one. Well, we don't know what it is, but another on the way. Yes.
That's tremendous, isn't it?
They're teaching me patience, which is something I don't really have. Yes.
There's lots of things. I'm just conscious of time. There's lots of things, folks, that I'd love to bring out of you to share with the folks here in Ballyhalbert. But you can't tell a whole life in 35 minutes.
Would you like
or even scrape it.
Would you like the one when I was working for Cabletel?
Yes, tell us about that. You worked for Cabletel.
I worked for Cabletel. Most of my working life, I was asked to work, and the Lord was good. He kept me with Christians, if not Christians, people who went to church and that. But I went to Cabletel, and just the way I said at Greenmount, they looked at me when they realised I was a Christian. We were working upside. I built those boxes, those metal boxes on the sides of the road, the metal lids. That was my job. But we were outside the normal house one day, and they were digging up the road to put down the ducting between it, and we happened to be standing waiting, and all the electric into the Donald house was supposed to be 3 foot down in the ground, but it was actually only about 18 inches. So when this machine came along, churning up the tarmac and all, there was this great flare and smoke and flames everywhere. But that's not the story I want to tell you. I'd been watching there, so I was walking away. The excitement was over. And one of these guys that was working with us, he turned around as I was walking past him, he said, "There goes John 3:16. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, what do I say here? So I turned around to look at him, and he says, "I suppose you're going to tell me that I'm not going to go to heaven." And I thought, what do I say here? And I said, it just came and said, "No, I can't do that. But you should be able to tell me if you're going to heaven." And that wasn't the answer he was waiting for. He just waved me away like that. But I was thinking now, most of these people were either IRA or Roman Catholic that I was working with. And the man I went to work with said, "Don't let it out too soon." And I thought, was it because I wouldn't work Sundays that he called me this? Or the other thing they did, you went away at night and you left your lorry ready for the next morning. Well, generally when we come in the next morning, our lorry was raided. So the guy, that's when I said, "Go around those other lorries and lift what you need." But I wouldn't do that. I went and waited the guy who fixed the things and waited for him to fix barriers and stuff before I would leave. So I don't know why that was, but I wouldn't take off people's lorries, working, digging up the roads. I had worked Sundays all my life, milking cows, but that was something that had to be done. But I wouldn't start digging up roads and doing that on Sunday, and which it was, but it made me feel a lot better than the guy asking me to tell those guys to wise up. So
yeah, you felt it in that.
I felt that I was going the right way.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, as I say, there is more. You left home, you lived for a while up at McIver's farm, and so much more we could say. But I think I would rather have left you to, if you could leave with folks here. Now, maybe there's folks here who's not saved, and certainly online, and maybe folks who listen to this, and thank you for listening through. And here's an opportunity for you, Robert, to share the greatest piece of knowledge and the greatest message, just as a parting message to folks who are listening here tonight and online.
You have to live by the Bible. And there's one thing now we didn't get to say. Baptism was something that was very big. We were brought up Presbyterian. You were baptised as a child. You got to 12. You did classes. You stood up and you said what you had to say, and then you took communion. But this, to me, the Spirit was telling me that this wasn't enough. Now, the Presbyterian Constitution says that if you wish to be baptised by being totally submerged, they should oblige. But peer pressure and the ones around, that didn't seem to be what they wanted. It was, oh yes, and all right, and put off. So I wasn't, in my mind, being obedient to my Saviour. So this is where my mother-in-law comes in. She was going to move to Spain, and my wife said, do you think would Ballyhalbert Gospel Hall baptise my mum? And I said, I'm sure they would. And she says, would you do, I thought she said, would you get baptised with her? And what she actually said was she was going to get baptised with her. And I said, well, I'm going to get baptised as well. Mm-hmm. And see, from the moment I got baptised and was being obedient to the Lord in my eyes, I feel I have moved forward at a much greater rate of knots. So I would suggest that you get your Bible, you read it, and if it's in it, do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just a final wee word maybe to someone who's just has listened to you tonight, Robert, as we've all done. We've heard of a young man who's grown up, and there was a point in his life you gave your life to the Saviour. And there may be someone who is just hovering there.
If you're just hovering there, pray about it. Pray to the Spirit, and He'll lead you. But don't put it off. I probably got saved. It wasn't probably because of love for the Lord at that stage, being honest. It was through, I was frightened of being left behind. But no matter what way the Lord is speaking to you, do what He asks. Get down on your knees. Accept the Lord Jesus as your Saviour. Don't worry about the world. The world will tell you you'll miss out on this, you'll miss out on that, you'll miss out on the other. I have been saved 50 years now, and I don't feel I have missed out on anything. I feel my life is full, and the Lord tells you He'll give you life to the full, and He's true to His word.
Amen. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. For it doesn't feel like the time has flown. I hope it hasn't for you either. We'll just finish there. I think possibly that Curtis, you maybe have a final hymn, have you? Believe Curtis. God bless you, Robert. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, folks, for listening. And we pray that God will speak to each of us and encourage us all.